few episodes ago, we talked to Mark Woltman about the things that you can expect to see at the Convenience Summit Asia. Today, we're going to talk about the things that we did see. Joining me today to talk about some of the things that we saw that were impressive and probably worth sharing with retailers is Jeff McQuilkin, who is with NACS and part of the team that went over to CSA, Convenience Summit Asia, learn some things, help get people around. And I guess the good news, Jeff, is nobody got lost on these trips.
Nobody got lost as far as we know, yeah. But it was a great week, and I'm happy to be here to chat with you about it.
So everybody's been to conference. Everybody knows what conferences are like. You have opportunities to network, to connect. You have some sessions where you learn from people about what's going on across the world. And those were great. But what we want to really focus on today is the store tours. And Jeff and I happened to be leading the same store tour. And we hit 39 stores over 3 days on these store tours. And I think it's worth explaining more about what those store tours were and then what we saw. And I'll just kick it off, Jeff. And it's the Jeff and Jeff show. So jump in whenever, Jeff. But what impressed me most about these tours is I alluded to Mark Woltman. He pre-walked these tours, I think 4 times, he said, and then he made us walk through them, and we did 9 point something miles, which we then spread over 3 days, and so then we were the experts, and we were given guidance. Here's the things we found interesting. Take it away from there. But for me, for people attending, what really impressed me is it didn't matter where you were from in the world. There were people from Australia, there were people from Asia, Europe, any place in the US. We had your backs and we had you covered. We had the information, we had subway tickets, all that stuff. And it was like you were in a bubble walking around and being able to share really, really cool ideas. Did that encapsulate it correctly?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, our colleague Mark did an incredible job of organizing these, and the instructions and the directions were down to the meter, to the yard. Walk 20 meters, turn right, look for the sign that's 6 feet high, and turn left there. So if anybody got lost, it wasn't his fault, it was ours, but I don't think anybody did. So that was great because it made the tours, I think, go very smoothly, and they were very informative. But above that, you're right. They not only gave us a chance to get a feel for the stores themselves, but for the city and for the culture of the city. And the only way you can do that really is by walking around and talking to people. And it was a great opportunity to do that. Absolutely.
And one of the misperceptions I had going in is that it would be a very busy city. There's a lot going on. And certainly it is 14 million people, something like that. So obviously a lot of people, but it was very, very manageable. And of course, being from New York, one of the things that stood out is jaywalking is something that's not even, you wouldn't even consider it. It doesn't matter if you can see 5 miles ahead, you don't cross the street. And so there were some interesting cultural things I thought we saw along the way. The lack of jaywalking, quietness in general, and to me also just the lack of the enormous hustle and bustle I expected. Certainly a hustle and bustle of a major city, but not chaotically so.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to say that I was a little intimidated going to the city, but I was curious about what the experience would be like, and I was not quite sure really what to expect. And I thought of those images that you were talking about, a very hustle and bustle city, crowded, and you see the pictures of people being jammed into subway cars and that kind of thing. But I felt very at ease very quickly. And I think that, as well as the other things that you just mentioned, the lack of jaywalking really speaks to something that I can hope we touch on today, which is just this incredible culture of respect, mutual respect. And I think that pervades almost everything that goes on in the city, and I assume the rest of the country. It was fascinating and a fresh change, I will say.
Well, let's keep talking about respect. I think one thing that stood out to us, before we get talking about the store tours and what we saw themselves, why don't you start talking about the garbage cans? Because that was absolutely fascinating to me.
What garbage cans? There were no garbage cans. Amazing. We might have seen a half a dozen in miles and miles of walking through the city. There are some in the stores, but on the streets there are no garbage cans. But there's also no garbage. You take it with you. You pack it out. The subway stations immaculately clean. The streets clean. Very impressive. Surprising. But yeah, no garbage cans.
And also, each of the days of the store tours, we were on the subway system, and as you mentioned, super clean. But also, it was quiet, and you really didn't hear talk about respect. 5 days, I didn't hear a car honk once, and the only time you really heard like elevated voices in conversations probably wasn't Japanese people. It was probably others talking in restaurants.
It was our group, I think, most of the time, unfortunately, for better or worse. But I think we learned to at least keep the conversation to a dull roar. But yes. You're right, absolutely quiet in the subway car, quiet on the streets. I might have heard one car honk, but again, it just comes back, I believe, to this culture of respect.
Yeah, and I didn't hear a car honk, and then I did. Getting out of the parking lot when I landed at Dulles Airport, I heard I wasn't fast enough with my parking ticket, and I got a honk, and it's like I wasn't even out of the parking garage. But go figure. Welcome back.
Yeah, exactly.
So we talked a little bit about the culture and the cultural respect. I'll let you kick it off first, and just talking about, like, we visited 39 stores.
Yeah.
Largely small format, and not. Because Tokyo, I think it's 17% car ownership, very few, if any, of the stores we visited had a parking lot. And we found stores in all kinds of locations. It certainly wasn't a right-hand turn. So you want to talk a little bit about the different locations that we saw?
Yeah, and I remember, speaking of parking lot, I remember specifically maybe talking to you when we were walking through one of the several malls that we were going through, that there were no directions even in a mall to parking. So parking was just not a thing. We did see some pay parking lots, but it is just not a thing there. So anyway, the formats we saw were obviously along city blocks and street corners, and we would see maybe 2 Family Marts a block away. We would see 3 competitors within 2 blocks. We would see underground malls, above ground malls, 5 stories high, with the one convenience store. I believe it was on about the 5th floor of the mall. Very smart use of space, but very creative, very different. No one particular pattern, I believe.
And also, talking about small space, we saw a lot of grocery stores. And for those in the U.S., I would say most of those grocery stores were roughly Trader Joe's size. You certainly didn't see something like Walmart or Costco size,
Absolutely.
But much, much smaller. And when there was something larger, it was part of a food court where it was like multiple businesses together. Correct. And you also, I joke about Costco, you didn't see gallon mayonnaise sold. You saw very, very small portions, maybe even at the largest grocery stores, maybe something that would feed 2 people, but not that the family pack that okay, have at it 16 people.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. A lot of the space of the grocery stores, of course, being, as you would see here, I suppose, as well, being dedicated to ready-to-eat meals. However, I did notice one exception to what you just said that I wanted to mention real quick. It was at one of the 7-Elevens that we stopped at, and it was a relatively small 7-Eleven. However, they had one display of relatively large, and by that I would mean maybe quart size bottles of like body wash, shampoo, laundry detergent, dishwasher detergent, as well as then refills next to the plastic bottles. Quite large compared to anything else I had seen even in grocery stores. Some were 7-Eleven brand, some were Dove, but I don't think I saw that at any other store, just at this one particular 7-Eleven. So they must have had a residential market right there next to them or very nearby.
So you mentioned convenience stores. Let's start talking about convenience stores.
Okay.
And let's just start with the food. And I'll tee it up, and then you riff off of that, and then I'll riff off of that. But there were the three big convenience store chains. There's 7-Eleven, Family Mart, which is also, they had a brand called Famima, which
Yep.
if it's difficult to see without writing, it's a mashup of Family Mart together, losing a couple letters. And then there's Lawson. And there are a lot of them, and they're all roughly the same size, which is small. Maybe
Yes.
2,000 square feet, maybe about the size of a traditional 7-Eleven in the U.S., not one of the bigger ones. But the what I was struck by is the food there is so good, but virtually nothing is prepared. You don't have a sandwich prep area. You don't have a barista. It's all grab it yourself, but it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I found that as well. And I think we learned while we were there that most of them have deliveries as often as 3 times a day. I became a big fan of, well, the eggs and egg salad seems to purvey a lot of the offerings there. I became a big fan of the egg salad sandos or sandwiches. They were, you could just tell they were incredibly fresh, delicious, cheap, very attractive offering, I thought. And then you're right, everything there was fresh, hot, and delicious that we tried, I thought. Now, I know some of your hopes and dreams for tasting were shattered, but overall, pretty great offerings, I think.
Okay, so for those who listen to the Mark Woltman podcast, I said one of my goals was to go find. He said the food preparation is so good that you can buy chicken sushi, which is essentially raw chicken. I said I was going to do it, and I didn't do it. But Jeff, at least you can confirm at one place I at least tried to do it.
You did. I think it was at least at one place. And I know you did. You were able to find a spaghetti sandwich or a noodle sandwich.
Oh, yeah. I had a noodle sandwich. Can't say that was my favorite.
Yeah. Well, live and learn.
Yes. So speaking of sandwiches I didn't expect to have, noodle sandwich was on that list.
Of course.
But a strawberry sandwich I didn't have on my list either. And that was really delicious. And I'm not talking strawberry jam. It was strawberry.
I remember you had that. And did you have a blueberry sandwich as well?
I had a blueberry one too. Yeah. And it tasted like a yogurt parfait between 2 slices of bread. And by the way, the sandwich is there. It's like the joy of being 5 years old again, because there is no crust on those sandwiches. And It's 2 slices cut vertically, because everybody knows sandwiches taste better when they're sliced vertically. And write the hate mail in. That's not up for debate. Slice them vertically,
like
they taste diagonally. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right.
Everybody knows diagonal is the best.
Yeah, I mean, you cut it the other way, it's just
a sandwich.
Yeah,
it's not elevated.
Yeah.
But yeah, the strawberries there in general were amazing. Even the ones that we would get in a package that you would see in a regular grocery store were as good as any farmer's market roadside stand fresh picked strawberries as I've ever had. They were amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think it was strawberry season necessarily.
No, but they did something.
Okay, I don't want to nerd out on the food that we had there because, well, it's difficult to show pictures. You guys can't taste it. We don't want people to be hungry. But going back to the idea of commissary, I think that's a huge opportunity for retailers in that we spend a lot of time in the U.S. It's food prepared. It's theater. It's all about, you got to show it's fresh. And a lot of times when people think of commissary, they think, oh, well, how long has that been there? And obviously, if you have up to 3 deliveries a day, it's only been there a little bit.
Yes.
I'll probably mispronounce it. Onigiri, is that it?
I think so.
Okay, that's the rice balls. And the kids, before I left, said on TikTok, it's all over the place. You got to get some of this. And it's basically rice balls, but they're triangular shape. And those were absolutely delicious as well. Just commissary, just sitting there in the grab and go. And you get 2 of those, and it's a meal, and it's about like $3.
Yeah, I think we saw them in just about every store we had in some form or another. You're right. I think the triangle was the most popular shape. I tried one. I forget what was in it, but I remember thinking the same thing. I had 2 of these, and I'm good for lunch. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they were pretty impressive from an engineering standpoint. You had to pull tabs in the right direction, because
Yeah.
basically it's rice balls with something inside. It could be tuna and mayonnaise. It could be something else. Whatever it was delicious. But it was wrapped by seaweed, and so by pulling these tabs in the right way, the seaweed gets introduced to the moist rice ball. So everything, it's, remember the McDLTs, the hot side hot, the cool side cool, same kind of thing. But you have to be able to remember that one.
Yeah. And I mean, let's face it, rice can get kind of nasty pretty quickly, but that was not the case with these things.
So we didn't have enough time to visiting 39 stores over 3 days. It's not like we had a half hour in each store. But the other thing that is a great grab and go snack that we saw everywhere was ramen. And like, you think about ramen, and maybe in the US you see cup noodles or something like that. Maybe there's 2 or 3 of them on a shelf. There were like 10 to 20 brands on the shelf, and then they had the hot water available, and it's grab and go and eat it. And I wish I were back in college. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, given the fact that I think ramen is such a huge part of the culture there, I suppose it's not terribly surprising, but nonetheless, it was a little surprising just to see all the different flavors, brands, kinds, and how easy it was to just get it. And like you said, top it off with your hot water and off you go. You're all set.
So, and yeah, in college, the big thing was you aren't supposed to have hot pots because you're going to burn down the dorm. But so everybody says, I'm going to get hot pots. I'm going to do ramen anyway. So, that was...
I was a maverick as well.
Yes. A bad boy, a lawbreaker.
They couldn't control me.
Yes. Right. So you mentioned hot water. Let's stay on the hot beverage theme. Somebody pointed it out, probably second or third store that we visited on the pre-tour tour. They had, like, if you go in a grab and go in most stores, there's the cooler doors, and you can grab cold beverages. Here, you could grab hot beverages, and I guess they're temperature regulated, where if you wanted to, you can make them cold in different months. But given that it was winter, there were hot beverages like canned tea, canned coffee.
Yes.
And retailers were just blown away by that here's an interesting concept.
Yeah, well, and speaking of hot side hot and cold side cold, a lot of those displays, as you recall, the bottom 2 or 3 shelves were cold products, and literally stacked right on top of that then were the hot shelves. So they were, again, going back to sort of a smart use of space. They had cold offerings, hot offerings, as easy a grab and go process as you could possibly imagine, right on top of each other. And the hot coffee was perfectly fine, and the cold drinks were perfectly cold. It was amazing. Really,
and it's a really great opportunity for people that brew coffee, and big focus on that. And there are people that just want hot coffee, and they can get it packaged and get it to go, and just grab it. Also saw younger consumers like iced coffee, and I don't know, you saw, I think, the same thing. Some of the iced coffee, they made it easy for you. A lot of stores, you have to get your ice, you have to kind of do this 2-step and go through this process. They just had cups of ice sitting in the cooler that you just grab and you use it for your iced coffee, and it just saves a step. So all about the user in mind, in as you said, very, very efficient use of space and how people get around.
Yeah, when I first saw those, I didn't understand what the cups of ice were for. I literally thought they were a separate item for sale, and then you're right. That kind of dawned on me that's what that was for. But they would, almost every store, I think, also had a pretty impressive selection of canned or bottled iced coffee in all different strengths and flavors as well. Not too much unlike you would see here, though, I suppose. But the coffee culture in general there is impressive.
Yeah. And also, we were there a couple days after National Cat Day, and cats are a big deal in Japan.
Yes, they are.
There were a lot of cat products that were still on the shelves.
We saw a lot of dogs too, though. I think pets in general.
Yeah, and you got those small, perhaps smaller houses. You don't have those McMansions, at least in the city. So small places, and you had cats and dogs, and they're part of the family, and you certainly saw it in the products there.
Absolutely. Yes, you did.
So we talked about food, we talked about beverages, we talked about how stores are quite similar in a lot of ways. Want to kind of end by, well, first off, I'll talk about one other way where they're similar. ATMs there. Now, ATMs, generally people think of them most places that they you go there to withdraw money, maybe to deposit money. But the ATMs there do a whole lot more. And I've always heard over the last decade or so that they do so much more. But we had a cameraman there, and he went through when he had somebody walk through the whole process. He was one click away from buying tickets for a baseball game.
Yeah.
On the ATM. It was really amazing, all the things you can do. It's anything that involves money, that ATM and paper, that ATM could do.
Correct. Banking transactions, pay your utility bills. I believe you could top off your Suica card, the app that you use on your phone to get for all the public transit. Mm-hmm. You can top that off at an ATM. You're right. Pretty much anything involving any kind of financial transaction. Pretty much every store had one, I believe.
Which is we're both baseball fans. It would have been nice. Too bad it wasn't in season. We could have used the ATM and gone to one of the local baseball games.
That would have been a first. Absolutely. I would have loved it. Yeah.
So I'd mentioned that's a lot of ways that stores were similar, but they also had different ways of standing out. I just want to, we have to talk about the Family Mart and their clothing line. So I'll let you kick that one off.
Yeah, so Family Mart pretty much everyone that we saw devoted a significant amount of space to a limited selection of clothing, mostly things, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but undershirts, socks, basic things, not tourist t-shirts, basic kind of clothing necessities. And we saw them at every Family Mart, and again, a decent amount of space. So it must, I'm assuming, be working. And we came up with some different theories as to who the market for convenience store t-shirts. I mean, undershirts.
Yeah. They had dress shirts. They had some other things. They had, I think, some kind of like croc-like shoes.
Yes.
But yeah, none of them had a logo on them. So like Buc-ee's, it's the opposite of Buc-ee's. You don't see a beaver on everything there.
Right.
There was nothing there. It looked like something you'd buy anywhere else, except it was the designer was a high-end designer in Japan, and a couple folks bought some of the clothes there. And they said,
I bought a plain white T-shirt just so I could say I have a convenience store plain white T-shirt.
Yes,
it's a nice T-shirt.
But really a big differentiator when you think about it, and I don't know what the opportunity is. And I think in the U.S. we're more accustomed to throw a whole bunch of words on it and sell it as swag. But there it was just a part of everyday life. Yeah,
I think it has clearly a practical purpose. Like I said, I don't know if we ever arrived at a consensus of who the general market is for that, but it must be working, so that's great. Loved it.
So anyway, if anybody wants to throw a guess out what we were talking about, you have our emails. Just we'll be happy to go through our suggestions that are likely wrong. And yes, we'll do a whole nother podcast about that with apologies and we were wrong and we should have used the internet and all that stuff. So let's end. And any big takeaways for you in terms of this is really, not really, it is only the second time I've ever been to Asia. I went 6 years ago, went to Shanghai for the Convenience Summit Asia there in 2019. This is my second time. And my reluctance was, well, I've been to Europe. I know what that's like. Maybe I don't know enough about this. Different language. I don't understand the letters. I couldn't believe how easy it was to get around. I was super impressed by everything and how NACS managed everything. It was like we could have been in Northern Virginia as far as I was concerned in my comfort level with how I felt getting around and navigating a day, whether in a group or by myself. How about any thoughts that you had about the experience?
Mine are similar. Everything seemed to run very, very smoothly. And A lot of that credit, I think, goes to some of our NACS colleagues who planned this down to the minute and to the meter. And a lot of it just goes to what we were talking about sort of at the beginning of this podcast. The city is very smartly done. And when you have that plus this culture of respect that we've mentioned so many times now, things just have a way of working very smoothly and very logically. The people are warm and friendly. If you only speak English, that is not a problem 98% of the time. So it's very easy to feel very comfortable very quickly.
Yeah, and for the 2% that it doesn't work, where you speak English and they don't, Google Translate was amazing. You can either point at a sign or say something through it, or any other translation service, and you're talking to somebody and you don't know each other's language.
Yeah, I actually used that to get out of a little bit of a jam that I got myself in on the day after the conference ended, and I was touring around the city by myself.
And that is that another podcast episode too with this jam
No,
involved?
That's not for public consumption, but I live to tell the tale, so everything's fine.
Okay, well, glad to hear. Next year it's in Beijing, and I'm sure Mark Walton will have 4 or 5 trips out there to organize things down to the meter, as you said. And
yeah.
On our store tour, you were in charge, and you were the one looking at all those instructions, and it was literally take a left here after you see this. It was pretty tight.
That's it. It was not terribly hard to do. Although I should say real quick, next year will be in China. Beijing actually may not be the destination. That may get changed. That's a recent update. But Stay tuned. We'll publish it on our website as soon as we know for sure, and that should be relatively soon.
And speaking of China, having gone there 6 years ago, a whole lot of interesting things there. Just amazing retail and so advanced. And that's why we have these events across the globe. So
exactly.
People can see what's going on, whether it's in the U.S., Middle East, Asia, Europe, go figure.
Or Copenhagen this coming May.
Yep.
Be a nice time to check it out if you haven't signed up already.
So go to convenience.org, see the dates for all of these events. I'll throw out one more thing that was really surprising. I saw a King Kong statue. I expected to see a Godzilla statue, but I also found a King Kong statue, and I did not see that coming.
I don't know what to say. It's great that he's getting equal airtime.
Yeah, I guess they're buddies now. They're film buddies. They have buddy movies. I guess that's it. So I really expected Mothra instead. Who knew?
Again, I know you had a couple of hopes and dreams shattered, but
yes,
overall, I think you would agree it was a great trip.
It was fantastic, and I hope you join us on one of these future ones because it's really eye-opening, and it's more than just Jeff and Jeff talking about cool experiences. You could really see retail, and that's as much as our job as the help we gave on site is learning retail and telling that story to others about where the changes are and what are the opportunities. So thanks for joining us. You were a great tour partner. We learned a whole lot together, and see you all on the road sometime soon. So thanks again for joining us. And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.